Welcome to the Landscape Photography Vlogcast. Join me, Mr. Photo Ninja, and Mr. Paul Thompson Photography from YouTube. Every Sunday morning at 10 AM for everything photography related. And also look out for some special guests. Grab yourself a brew, beer, or something stronger, and let's get into this week's Vlogcast. Right, so welcome to the podcast. This is, how many is this, Paul, now? 1, 2, 3, this is 4.
Number 4, yeah, number 4.
Number 4. And today we got David Johnston. Hi, mate. Right, how you doing?
I'm good. How are y'all doing?
Not too bad. How's it over there in the States?
You know, it's not too bad. Spring's starting to fire up, but, you know, you get leaves starting to come out this time of year, and mountain streams where I am are pretty nice to go and photograph, but we haven't really been able to get out and do that. My kind of home park, I guess you just should say, is the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in East Tennessee, and it's been closed for weeks now. And I think it's for good reason too. You know, that many people getting out to a park when work's closed down, you just start to treat it as a holiday, and staff just can't. I mean, they can't keep up. It's not really too much the crowds and breaking people up, but it's more along the lines of campgrounds. What do you do about cleaning bathrooms? How do you regenerate campsites? All this stuff comes into play. So, I mean, I understand, but like we were talking about earlier, it's hard to reopen things reasonably and then kind of, if things get worse, shut it back down and try to figure out how do you manage that reopening time. And in Tennessee, they're starting to reopen things a little bit more, and we're already starting to see some just poor management of it. Honestly, I predict it'll be probably closed down again in another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We've got some issues.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know who you are, I know you probably answered this question 100 times, but do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your photography journey up until now?
Yeah. Well, my name's David Johnston. I've been a landscape photographer professionally, kind of on and off the past 7 years. So when I really started out doing film photography in high school. And we would just get our assignments, and we'd be able to go out with our film cameras, just like a typical 35 millimeter film camera, and go out and shoot. We would develop our own film in the dark room and just have these fun class assignments. I honestly don't think my teacher really cared what we did, which was kind of dangerous at the time. But as long as we turned something in, she was happy. But it kind of fell away when I went to college, and coming out of college, you know, in 2010, I got my first DSLR, and I think my personality type just becomes really hooked on something that grabs my interest, and I just have to learn everything about it. So I had a job where I could be out, you know, surveying land. I was a GPS and GIS coordinator in a local government. And I would go out and GPS stuff and come back and map it in the office. But while I was out, I would take my camera out, or I would, you know, log locations for later that I knew would look good at sunset or sunrise, and get up early before work, you know, stay out a little bit later before coming home. And that's kind of how I really honed in my skills. And then once I did go full time, I did it for about 3 years. And my wife and I, during that time, moved into one of those little tiny houses. So we were living in 160 square feet at the time. And it was just fun living, and go out and shoot when you wanted to. And after that, we took a little bit of a break from life in the States, and we lived in Haiti for 2 years. We were missionaries in Haiti. And after coming back, you know, started the business up again. And that's kind of where we are now.
Cool. Wow. How's it like? What was it like in Haiti?
It's kind of wild, man. I tell people it's a lot like a paradox, and it's kind of hard for developed countries to really understand what it's like, because everything is available to us. We have locations to go photograph. We have, grocery stores to go to, but there you have modern conveniences on one hand with like internet, and they even have like fiber internet over there, which makes no sense to me because you look at everything else they have, and roads are terrible, businesses and buildings are awful conditions, and we'd have to drive like 2 hours to go to the grocery store, and you never knew what traffic was going to be like. And it was just this weird like in between of worlds that we kind of lived in for 2 years. And while it's not like a dangerous place very much, you did kind of have to be careful about where you would go for, if you did want to go shoot sunset, you didn't want to linger too long after dark whenever you were staying out somewhere. But once you kind of gain the trust of the community around you, you didn't really have to be afraid of people like doing anything to you or anything like that.
Yeah, so I suppose you got to watch all your gear and that. And is that what you mean? Just, all you, like, I suppose obviously being in that environment, it's a bit daunting anyway, isn't it? When you're in that sort of foreign environment.
That you never really can predict like weather conditions there because they don't have a good system to predict that. I mean, you could generally assume, 4 p.m. these months of the year, it's probably going to come through and have a big storm. Yeah. But you did have to be careful about your gear. Like, your camera and 3 lenses is probably going to be like a year's salary to somebody. So it's not really a choice to them. Am I going to feed my family or, let this white dude walking around stay peaceful? I mean, that's kind of how it was and kind of how you had to think about it.
Did you find that your photography was more stripped back, more, I don't know, more real when you was out shooting in places like that, or?
It was a little bit more raw, I think I would say, because what you're dealing with there is a landscape that's not really photographed. So you have to really think about what that location is giving to you. And it doesn't give much because there's so much clutter around. You can't go to have like a giant scenic overlook. Typically, you're going to have farms in there too. You're going to have roads, houses, things like that. And trash was everywhere, honestly. So it was really hard to compose something that looked really nice. But I think that once you got over the problem of having to photograph what we typically think of as a nice landscape, you start doing something a little bit more like documentary photography, where you start telling the story of the place that you're at. And if trash gets in the way, so be it. If, there's a dilapidated building in the way, so be it. Or, you could go up in the mountains, where I went a couple, maybe 3 times, and photograph an amazing scene with terraced farmland going down the side of a mountain, and then like low-laying fog and just mountain peaks sticking out. So it's kind of like a give and take of where you are. And ultimately, I think being in that situation and those conditions really taught me to work with what's given to you in the landscape, and just try every time you go out to photograph something to at least, create something that tells a story to your viewer.
Yeah. So you would say that obviously traveling around, especially in places like that, you do opens your mind, and you do learn, and you're moving forward with your photography.
For sure. I think so. Not only like what I was just talking about, but also because you get into the situation of a place that's not photographed before. You have no real sense of anyone else's compositions that you can kind of go out and play with and kind of base your images off of too. So the sky is the limit in that situation. And it can be overwhelming and kind of a daunting task to see something that, you're kind of like the first photographer that's seriously put work into that place, and you don't really want to mess it up, or, that thought starts to creep into the back of your mind. Like, am I doing this the right way? I fought those thoughts a lot when I was there, even if it was just photographing the mountains off of my back deck. Getting out someplace like that gives you freedom, but at the same time, it's really overwhelming, and it can be challenging in certain situations.
Yeah, because usually a case of where you can look at anything and look up anywhere on the internet, and you'll find images of it somewhere. And when you go to somewhere like that and there's absolutely nothing, you don't even have a clue where you should be pointing your camera, really.
Yeah, I challenge anyone to find a good landscape photograph of Haiti. It doesn't exist.
That's so interesting to hear that, actually, because I think a normal person would think, oh, that, like Paul said, that would be, how refreshing would that be? If anything, there's no rules. There's nothing to compare it to, so the pressure's off. But yeah, like you said, at the same time, it must be quite daunting, because like you said, you are the first person to plonk your legs down and have a crack at it. So yeah, I can imagine that would be. I never thought of it like that, but yeah, it's interesting to. So talking about your photography, then, how do you normally? I know I'm generalizing it, but how would you normally, your thought process from thinking of a location idea to choosing a location to actually taking the image and then sitting home and looking at it afterwards? How do you your process normally work? Do you have like a set sort of a system that you work to?
I think it evolves over time. And I think it becomes more of a cyclical process. Over a span of years. I think when a lot of people start out, they go and take those just like banger shots of, Horseshoe Bend and, what's even the,
Big Vista shots.
Like Mesa Arch, them sort of classic shots, you mean?
Yeah. Shots like that, places and locations like that. But over time, you start thinking about, how can I make this a little bit more unique? And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up. And it did me too when I started shooting more of my style of scenes, because I didn't have a style at the time. It's really hard to break away from that and create your own style. So typically when I go and photograph a place, I'll walk into a location, especially one that I've never photographed before. You walk into that scene and you're overwhelmed, like we were talking about before, and I'll take that initial shot and just frame that up. Afterwards, I'll kind of look at it, inspect it. I know Michael Fry talks a lot about what in this image takes away from the whole composition, and kind of try to eliminate that and just whittle down the composition to simplify it as much as possible. Through that process, you become aware of multiple other things going on within the landscape. So typically after taking that initial shot, whittling down a composition, might be like a wide angle shot. Let's say I'll set up my wide angle lens on a camera on a tripod when I'm in the field, and then switch over to hand holding a 70 to 200 or 100 to 400 if I'm renting a lens like that. Typically I don't have one with me, but I'll try to pick little things throughout the landscape that are interesting or that are unique to that place, maybe even a macro shot here and there. But I'll kind of wait for the light to get right with my wide angle lens, and that way I kind of have a multitude of different kinds of shots from the same location. I kind of maximize my time there that way, because when we go into locations, what people typically don't think about is, we're there 5-6 days at a time. And if we want a certain shot or a certain location, we may go back to the same place over and over and over, night after night. That can be said for like night photography too. If you want that certain Milky Way shot, you have a small window of nights that you can go out there and get that shot. So it really becomes a technique of trying to maximize your time and your photos in a location, but also trying to whittle down the composition to making it make just enough sense to where you can see what the subject is, but having enough complementary subjects within that image that points to that subject without taking away from it. And it's a really delicate balance, I think, that, I mean, I still have trouble dancing around with in the field, or kind of like even teaching people how to do, because it's a feel thing whenever you are out in the field.
Definitely. I can definitely relate to that, because that's decluttering and trying to simplify, like you just said, is something that I've tried to work on and tried to grow into. And since starting workshops, that's the thing that I found hard to try and relate to people that I take out, is trying to, how do I make this come across? How do I take what I'm thinking in here and sort of transport it into the person that I'm taking? And I think that's quite definitely a challenging thing to do. But so how do you feel like is there anything, one particular thing you think you've grown it into, like something you've thought 5 years ago I must be better at that? Or how's your journey been, do you think, to the point where you are now?
I think 5 years ago, really, it was more along the lines of, how do I take a great photograph every single time I go out into the field? But I quickly learned that leads to a lot of frustration. And trying to do that every single time. And man, I would beat myself up so much if I came back empty-handed, or even tried to force a photo like into the realm of like website worthy images. And I think if I've gotten better at anything, it's being okay with coming back empty-handed. And when I do have something, in my camera that I can really look at and be proud of and enjoy, and, great conditions apply to that too. The editing part of it, being patient in editing, has been a huge learning curve for me, just because, everything that we're taught, if you do go into like a typical job scenario, is speed and just maximizing time and really just trying to churn out things as fast as possible. And when you do that, you can look back at the images that you posted 2 years ago or 5 years ago and say, well, kind of missed that dust spot there, or wish I would have added a little bit more contrast with dodging and burning here or there. So really taking the time to look at an image for a longer period of time and then come back to it a month, 2 months later, and try to clean it up as best possible, and getting that deconnection from your images is important. Still loving them, but also having that deconnect from emotion from them to really objectively look at them has been probably the biggest thing that I've tried to improve on with my own photography, like you said, over the past 5 years.
So do you find then with doing YouTube videos, do you find an added pressure with getting an image, or do you not let that bother you at all?
I think, it's kind of the same answer, Paul. It's kind of like when you started out, I put a ton of pressure on myself to get an image every single time. And YouTube, what's so interesting about it is that thought gets into the back of your head. Like, this is not an Instagram post. YouTube is a search engine that can stay evergreen for 5-10 years. So when you do come back empty-handed, you're kind of like, well, what was the point of somebody watching that 10-minute long video? I mean, they just totally wasted their time doing that. But I think going out into the field and trying to photograph something and teaching people along the way, or communicating effectively, like why something doesn't come together, and give them tips as well on, this may be something that you can come back to at this condition or this type of year, or talk to them or teach them about, how to log this into photo pills is, a really good way to use that platform. But 100% now, like, I think I did one last year that it was right around the same time as this year, and somebody commented on it yesterday. And I had totally forgotten, like, I even went on this trip out there, but I went to a totally new national forest that's just south of where I live. And I went out there, hadn't really found a lot of images on it to really, see what's out there. So I just went out there to hike and try to find something. And at the end of the video, I remember saying, I totally hated today. Like, I'd got nothing. The light was terrible. Conditions were awful. But it was still fun to shoot. And somebody commented on it yesterday, and I was like, oh man, I totally missed an opportunity to at least teach them something about, or share some advice about not coming back with something every single time. But
yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, actually, because I found that with a fairly recent video as well. I was toying with the idea of completely sacking it off and just binning it, because I'd got myself so obsessed with the fact that the image wasn't right. I thought, what's the point of this? And then I kind of thought to myself afterwards, now the whole point is to get across that it doesn't always work out. It never always works out as you think it's going to, and it's good to get that across to the people as well.
Yeah. Well, this type of year, spring, y'all are in Northern Hemisphere too. So do y'all find the same thing? Is it hard to kind of compose something and plan on blooming trees and great lighting conditions right now?
It's difficult, isn't it? It's more difficult. Well, I don't know, because I'm not a huge planner anyway. That's more Tom's realm. I don't do. I've got more of a kind of open feel to my photography. I like to kind of turn up somewhere and really take it as it comes, unless I'm going specifically for a certain purpose, which I don't do that often.
Yeah, I think since because I started my photography growing up by the sea, so the seasons are not so they're not so distinguished. We don't have so distinguishable seasons. We don't have sort of obviously we have spring, autumn, and winter, but when
do we have those? Let me know.
Yeah, we just tend to have summer and winter, and it's windy and windier.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, up down by the sea. So it's since moving back to still southern but slightly higher, I got some real good woodlands and things like that. And I'm starting to this year. I was starting to think, right now I need to be doing this more spring, autumn, the bluebells, and things like that. So yeah, it's something that I was planning on doing this year, was practicing taking advantage of them seasons. But obviously, with the way things have been going, none of that's come to light. But yeah, it's planning's a funny thing, isn't it? It's a bit like we were talking about earlier about trying to learn to be okay with not getting a shot. I find planning very similar. You have to, obviously make a plan. You choose a location based on the weather or season, but you have to be okay with it might not work out, because that will obviously relate to not getting an image as well. Yeah. You know what I mean? Do you find the seasons are very distinguishable over your way, or?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And where I live, typically I live in West Tennessee. So we are still technically the South and the southeastern states. And in the winter, it's typically 50 degrees and rainy for the majority of winter, which is really depressing and sad. We might get 1 or 2 days where it snows and everybody freaks out, but it's only, a half an inch of snow or a dusting of snow on the ground that is just nothing. And then spring, you get really nice weather, typically weather you would find kind of like in San Diego almost, of 70s, sunny. It's really nice. You get a lot of trees that start to leaf out, and it's just this bright, vibrant green, and it just looks incredible. And then summer is just really the deepest pits of hell and heat. And it's just this just terrible humidity. I mean, it seems like that the temperature goes up 20 degrees because it's 95% humid outside and it's 95 degrees in and of itself. So it's just this oppressing heat, and trying to go out and photograph in that is just abysmal unless you are by a creek or something and you can wade in. And then fall is the most difficult to predict. Okay. So you go out, you can go out the same week of every single year, and fall is going to look completely different throughout, because 2 years ago we had an amazing fall. Leaves turned for 2 weeks at a time, and they were peak for a really long period of time, and you had ample amount of time to go out and photograph. However, when you got like conditions like we had last year, what tended to happen was we got a really bad drought around the time that fall started. So leaves started to burn off a little bit more. And you didn't get a lot of those leaves hanging around in the trees, and peak color lasted for just a few days. So you had to bust it when you went out and try to get as much image as you could out of that short time period. So it's really predictable 3 months out of the year, I would say. And then fall's kind of like that wild card that you have to play around with.
So let's talk a little bit about light and composition. And obviously everyone seems to sort of focus on composition, and then some people focus on like framing around some light. How do you normally? What's your priorities in terms of that?
I think I go more towards the composition front rather than just focusing on light. But I mean, that can get you in a little bit of a mess a lot of times, can it? It's just, you know, you once you get stuck to a composition, you end up kind of with tunnel vision of just seeing that one type of shot. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about, using 2 cameras at one time, because you can kind of set up a composition that you want and hope for that light to come in. Yeah. And then you also have another camera that you can play with to react to the light. And I think a lot of times that's the most healthy way to photograph and healthy way to stay balanced. Because while, you know, we were talking about a little bit ago, you know, Paul was talking about not being a planner and kind of going out and just seeing what happens when you do go out. And I think planning is important, but I also think there's a balance to it. Really honing in on a shot that you want, but then as well being able to react and adapt to everything going on in the landscape typically has its advantages too. So there's 2 different ways of looking at it, and both have pros and cons. And I think it just comes down to what that typical photographer likes to do. I know one of the types of photography that I'm just terrible at is like the small scenes that a lot of photographers gravitate to once they are tired of wide angle shots. And I know photographers like Alex Noriega, Sarah Marino, they kind of preach just go out and wander and see what happens. So I can't really do that. My mind doesn't work that way. I kind of have to have a goal in place of what I could potentially get. And then if I don't find that, just play with what's there and then just try to create something while I'm out there.
Yeah, I think that comes for me, especially, well, Tom, you'll be the same, is with having kids, it's finding that time to get out and do it. So it's a case of when we do get out, you can't just say, well, I haven't got the conditions I wanted at the time. You've got to kind of adapt for the conditions that are there. So at least you can come back with something. That's the idea for me anyway.
Yeah, I definitely have limited time. But that is kind of why I like him. I like to plan or have some sort of plan in my head, which never follows through, but it just seems to help me organize how I'm going to go about it. But yeah, it's time is a major factor for me, especially like we said. I mean, Paul obviously not full time, so when you do, yeah. Yeah, if Lumix are listening, I am available.
Is it tough though? I mean, both of y'all have kids. I'm going to have our first kid is coming in August. So like, I kind of see that on the horizon, and I'm thinking, what little time I do have, even though I am full-time, typically when you do go full-time, photography is still your second job because you're doing the business side of it for so much time out of the day. How do you guys advice for me on balancing time here?
Wow.
Oh, dear.
Where do we start? Well, congratulations for a
Yeah,
stort.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Definitely.
do
Enjoy it
you
while
know-
it lasts. That's all I'll say.
Do you know if you're having a boy or a girl?
We're having a girl, yeah.
Oh, ideal. I can. Well, that's the same as me. I've got a little girl. She's 2 now. So, advice. If you think you're tired now, you ain't.
That's probably the best advice I've gotten so far.
Yeah. I take it because obviously you're a photographer. You're used to getting up early, and you're used to,
Right.
I don't know, not running on less than 8 hours, but you're used to. Like me, I can fall asleep pretty much anywhere if I need to.
Yeah.
Which has helped me. But yeah, you'll learn to sleep whenever you can, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
for sure.
They don't have off buttons. There's
No.
there's just no off button on them.
Are you quite laid back?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good because you learn to just let things slide. You know what I mean? Like a few times I've had Willow on my own, which is quite rare, mainly at weekends. And she gets her toys out, and then she plays it for like 30 seconds, and then she's like, "Daddy, do this." And I'm like, "Hang on a minute, whoa!" I said, "Let's put these away first," and then. And I used to do it all the time. Now I just let the house get in a complete mess, and then I quickly tidy it up before Kirsty comes home. Yeah, so that's about all I can say, really. It's just go with the flow and just grab any sleep you can.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, I would say the same.
You got boys, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got 2 boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have a lot less trouble than I do. Because it's just utter chaos. Every day is just utter chaos. I come home from work, and after a day's work, you're thinking, get home, get a bit of a relaxing time now. Yeah, as soon as you walk through the back gate, it's screaming. There's kids running from one end of the garden to the other. Oh, it's just utter bedlam having 2 of them. And I think having 2, it's even worse because they bounce off each other. So it's just, yeah.
But no, you'll love it, mate. You'll love it. It's no matter how tired you get or frustrated you get or I don't know, hungry you get. It's when she says "daddy" and you sit on your lap and you read her a book and nice. It's brilliant. I can't wait to get home from work. Even if I think, oh, she's going to be a nightmare. It's good fun. It's all good fun.
Yeah, I told my wife I wanted a girl when we first found out, just like from facts that, I had a brother, an older brother growing up, and it was like Paul said, it was just chaos every single day. We would just try to like fight and break each other's arms and it was just madness at our house. But that's kind of why I wanted a girl. It just feels pretty more chill.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
it's funny. It seems like yesterday she was still on her hands and knees, and then the next minute she's like telling me what to do, and it's it's, I don't know. I'm quickly feeling outnumbered, if I'm honest. Oh yeah. So talking about you going full time and your business side of things, how do you see your business going forward into the future?
I think it's starting to transform a little bit, especially with everything going on right now. I think it was about 2.5 years ago, maybe even, I was on Matt Payne's podcast, and I told him, I fully anticipate that in the near future, workshops will die. And that was kind of like this whoa moment, I think, at the time. But I think it's starting to come to fruition a little bit. You know, I think workshops can typically be, depending on the location, a little bit saturated. But at the same time, what we're seeing now is with everything starting to move online, I think people are getting a little bit more creative about how they make money online with their photography. And that's going to start pushing that type of work forward a little bit more. And also the quality. If you look at courses that you can buy online right now, typically across the board, you can probably, if you're savvy with video editing and audio, you can churn out a whole course in a day if you really bust it that entire day.
Yeah.
But over time, what we're starting to see, especially with guys like Michael Shainbloom coming out with a time-lapse course, Ian Plant starting to make some of his courses on landscape photography, they're taking whole production teams out with them. So it's really starting, like we talked about in the landscape, reacting and adapting. I think looking at photography business, and a lot of photographers don't like the business side, but that's the part about it for some reason that I get really like excited about. And I love the business side. It's more of a game to me. I'm a highly competitive person. So the landscape side is the relaxing side of my life, and 50% of that. And then the business side is when I, make a to-do list and really bust it out of what I need to get done. And I think production wise, it's going to start to get a little bit more in depth how good that video quality can be. People are going to start noticing, when you mess up a word here and there, they're going to start noticing video quality, audio quality, sound effects in the background, how much editing work you put into it. And with that same thing, while online video continues to be kind of what everybody gravitates to right now, we're starting to see more saturation in that market too. So how do you react to that? Do you up your game? Are you using this time right now that we're living in as a way to learn more video editing techniques, maybe play around with Premiere Pro, After Effects, really getting some graphics into your work? I think that is where you get set apart from everybody else. Communication is obviously very important. Production is obviously very important. Information, very important. What you give them in the course, very important. But people want to be entertained through that as well. And I think putting little things in there really help you stand out in that sense. And I think that is where I'm putting more of my eggs into that situation, that basket, or the leg of the stool, if you want to look at it that way. How many sources of income do you have? The more we do this, the more online work is going to push workshops out. And that's not to saying that you still can't have workshops as a part of your business model. Of course you can. It's just you have to really work with specific locations, I think, the ones that get the most signups. You really have to think about how are you doing this legally, because so many places, especially in the States, national parks have a lot of stipulations you have to get through. You have to get licensing. You have to get certifications here and there. So you really have to think about how you're going to do this legally and get those certain qualifications you have to get. And all that comes into money too. How do you budget all of these costs? And it's just all of this starts to snowball into just so much work that I think a lot of people don't see when they say, I want to become a full-time landscape photographer. Then when you start talking about these things, they get overwhelmed. But that's where I see it going.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because me and Paul have talked about it, especially recently with this whole virus thing. It is, like you said, it is forcing people's hand a little bit. It is interesting to see. Everyone's doing, a lot more people are doing podcasts, a lot more people doing online courses. So it will be very interesting to see how it all goes. But like, you are right, I do think that is, I think there's always going to be a market for workshops, but I do think it will be more, like you said, like a smaller market. You'll have to spread it out a little bit more into your time into other things, definitely.
Yeah, I think too, Tom, like pointing that out is, I think once you do start whittling down your workshops, you have to get more comfortable too being a presence online. You have to get a little bit more comfortable with the fact that, in essence, we are influencers. I mean, typically when you think of an influencer on Instagram, you think of a millennial female who's pushing beauty products on, what you should buy, or like stuff that you cook with, or, just those household items, really. And that can be male or female now that we're starting to see. And what is happening with that is photographers in general kind of have this mindset of, I don't want to be that, so I'm going to push that away. And instead, I think we need to look at what they're doing well and bring that into landscape photography. How are they communicating with their audience to get people to respond to what they're saying? Not in sales, but in that can be time spent, that can be email inbox, that can be attention, comment, shares. You can't always think about that person as a customer. You think about them as a fan, as a friend. So what are they doing well that's going to adapt to what I'm doing in photography? And how do I communicate that? Maybe just changing a few words around and not trying to reinvent the wheel per se, but instead using what they're doing that's working and implementing it to what you're doing that's working. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, it's all about adapting to the demand, really, and and the way things are. I think the people that I don't know are stubborn to that or miss the trick might struggle in the near future. I don't know. I think it will be nearer than people think, especially as these days. You got to talk to I don't know how many kids you talk to, and you ask them what they want to do for a living. In a landscape aside, I'll bet you a lot of them would say, I want to play Call of Duty for a living, or you know what I mean. I know it's not the same genre, but you can relate to where things are going to be going.
Yeah, you definitely have to adapt with it. That's for sure. You definitely have to go with it, and as you say, see what works and bring it on board. Really, you can't really close your eyes to anything, I don't think. No. Otherwise, you will get left behind, I think.
Right. Shall we end with a quick fire?
Yep.
These are questions that we're trying to do to everyone, ask everyone, aren't we? So let's start with the first one. I'm going to try not to mess this one up because I've done it the last time.
You wrote them. That's the best part.
Yeah, I think maybe you should do it next time, actually, because obviously I ain't no good at it. Right. Black and white or color?
Color, for sure.
Mirrorless or DSLR?
Mirrorless. Saving money on space and weight is just essential, in my opinion.
I like how he's expanded on his answers. I know it's a quick fire. Yeah, it's nice to get a bit more information. Landscape or portrait?
Ooh. Wow, that's tough. Okay, portrait is what... I'm starting to talk like you now. Portrait is what I gravitate to. Landscape is what I typically try to force myself to shoot.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I'm normally the other way around. But yeah, that's cool. Light or composition?
Composition.
Filters or exposure blending?
Ooh, exposure blending, just because I hate the clutter of things. I'm a minimalist, so the less gear I can use to screw something up, the better.
Photoshop or Lightroom?
Typically Lightroom, or I'll give you a different one. I use Luminar a lot, actually. And I like the images that it turns out to.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise for pastel colors.
Now, do you prefer to shoot local or the rest of the world given a choice?
It's changed. So I used to go rest of the world. Now I'm going more local.
Plan or spontaneous?
Plan.
Woodland or landscape?
Landscape. I suck at woodland photography.
Me too. I'd have still tried.
Intimate or grand vista?
Grand vista, but forcing myself into more intimates.
That's intimate. Something that I've been trying to do as well, a bit more. Have you ever heard of a chap called Simon Booth?
Yeah.
Yeah. Me and Simon are quite pally, and I just love the way that he, even if he's not using a macro lens, like he does tend to pick. It's amazing what he picks out. I see an image he took, I don't know, a few months ago, and it was just like some pine cones. I don't know if you've seen it, but the way he composed just a pile of pine cones was just insane. So yeah, trying to find them intimate little scenes is certainly a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Certainly is. How are you finding the new Sony?
I like it, man. It's different. It definitely slows down my computer a little bit more with the file size, but I do like it. I think it's helpful that the menus are kind of similar. So I already know basically where everything is, but
in one of the 300 menus, yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I tell you, man, I still will gravitate back to that A6000 so many times. It does churn out some really good images.
Yeah, it does.
That's what I really enjoyed it. So that's what you have too?
Well, I had one. I got one for vlogging. I got an A6000 for vlogging with, and I quickly found myself using it more than my main camera at the time. And that's the point where I started using the A6000, and then from there I got the A7R2, and yeah, just love it. Just love it. I got used to using that A6000, and I just decided I wanted to stick with Sony, really.
Yeah, I was using the A6000 for vlogging too, and I really liked it. The only bad part about it is it doesn't have a flip screen so that you can't see how you're composing the video. So I got a Fuji X-A7 and was trying it out and just hated it. Like the menu, I love like the XT3, XT30, but the X-A7, like the menu was so confusing and it made no sense, and the autofocus on it wasn't great. So I actually went back to the A6000 a little bit more, but then also used the little DJI Pocket camera, the Osmo Pocket.
Yeah.
That thing is pretty sweet.
Yeah, I love it. Just to have it in your pocket and you can just pull it out and away you go. It's ready to go.
Yeah, for sure.
No messing about.
Yeah.
GoPro killer, eh?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, I think it is, to be honest with you. It's less cluttered, and you can just, as I say, you just pull it out and you go. There's no messing around with it. You can flip it around so you can see the little tiny screen this big.
Mm-hmm.
At least you can kind of compose something with it and get yourself in frame. That's a good thing.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about where people can find you, David?
Sure, yeah. People can find me on my website at davidjohnstonart.com, on YouTube if you look for David Johnston Photography, and Instagram, Twitter, putting actually a pretty good amount of work in on LinkedIn and TikTok right now. No dancing or anything like that on TikTok. I don't have the moves. Paul, I mean, you could do well on there. Look at you go, man. That's awesome.
That's pretty good dad dancing, that, man.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Good.
I'm getting down at dad dancing. That's something you'll learn. That's something you'll learn, mate. You'll get good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, on all those platforms, it's just David Johnston Photo. But watch for TikTok, I think, is another place for photographers to gravitate to. I'm seeing a lot of bad advice for photographers on TikTok. So if you get better advice on there, I think it's a good place for growth right now.
Yeah, I just downloaded it. I just downloaded it for that very reason, because I saw you saying about it that it was an up and coming place. So I thought, I better check that out.
Yeah, I might have to look at that as well. I didn't know anything about that. Oh, yeah, I'll check that out. Just before we go, you'll just talk a little bit about Nature for Nature First, because you're they've recently approached us, and we've started up a page, and we just loved what their principles were and what they were trying to do. So me and Paul grabbed the opportunity to do that, and we noticed obviously that you were a part of the organization as well. How did that come about?
Yeah, I think knowing Matt Payne had a lot to do with it. He reached out to me and kind of asked about it, and what I thought about their principles, and if I wanted to join and be a member. I think at the time of their launch, I was one of the first members. So it's important to not only photograph a place, but also fall in love with it. And doing so responsibly is a great way to learn more about a location. And I think once you really start to know more about locations and the more how to appreciate them responsibly, the better images you can get. And also you become kind of like an advocate for that place. So like I've talked about Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a lot of times what I see is those like stacked rocks by the river. I don't know why people do that, but in the Smokies, there is an endangered salamander that will actually lay its legs up under stones in those locations. And when people take the stones out and start stacking them, it kills the eggs. So knowing little things like that, and knowing, not to remove anything from the landscape or alter it in any way, and put nature first over your images is a really good way to better understand and better appreciate the places that you are going to shoot. And not only that, talking so much about what we're going through right now, how we can't go out to national parks currently, but this is a great time. If we think about it positively, this is a tremendous time for locations to regenerate from all the terrible things that we've done to it. Again, look at Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We had a huge fire a few years ago on one of the most popular sections of the park that completely torched the landscape, and it hasn't had time to regenerate well enough to handle that much foot traffic. And I think this being spring and having so much growth come into play with no foot traffic has been a tremendous time for that section of a park to regenerate and get more growth in. And once we do go back, I would highly encourage everybody to join Nature First, to look at its principles, to apply them to your photography, and above all else, don't damage the landscape. I see it so many times when I go out to shoot of people just doing dumb stuff for the sake of a photo, and just fight that temptation when you're out. Because if you do snap that tree limb to get a better view of the valley that you're photographing, it'll probably be a better photo, but you are kind of doing your part in damaging landscapes and doing your part for the snowball effect of what humans can cause to a location.
Yeah, definitely, because we have the same problems here, certainly. I mean, there's places in Scotland that have just been trashed, quite honestly, by so much footfall, and that's one of the reasons why I took it on as well, because I thought it was a great idea, and we needed something over here in the UK to kind of carry that message forward, really. So that's why we've both joined up, just to kind of give people somewhere to go for that information.
I'm sick of rubbish. Litter. Living by the sea. I obviously go out and shoot lots of seascapes, and just the beach. When we had like a big high tide. The rubbish, and then since moving to Wiltshire, the countryside and the woodlands. I know it's a more densely populated area anyway, but the litter you see, even when you walk like 2 miles into the old oak forest, you still find litter. So yeah, it was a no-brainer for me, if I'm honest. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a blast talking to you, mate. I really look forward to all week to talking to you, and I wish we could talk for longer, but this podcast is going to be about 3 hours long.
Yeah, so anytime y'all want to have me back on, just let me know.
Yeah, we will, definitely.
Yeah, no worries.
So what we'll do is, as well as I'll put all the links in the description of the video below, as well as yours and Nature First. So if anybody wants to check that out, please get on board.
Yeah. Ideal. And
Awesome.
If you're ever in the UK, you know where to check us out, and we'll see if we can sort out some sort of a meetup or something, mate.
Will do. Thank y'all.
Good.
Cheers, mate.
If you're watching this, then I assume you're someone who is passionate about both photography and the natural world. Over the last decade, I'm sure you've seen the incredible growth in photography. Everyone has a camera these days, and everyone wants a beautiful nature photo to share with the world. Unfortunately, the passion to capture that image often overrides thoughtfulness. Wildflower fields are being trampled and destroyed. Delicate, unknown locations are being widely advertised, bringing crowds of people, transforming wild places into urban spaces. Regulations, private property, and the well-being of wildlife are ignored in the pursuit of an image for Instagram. If such things weigh heavily on you, consider joining Nature First, the movement for responsible nature photography. This is a global initiative to help recover the role of nature photographers as caretakers and ambassadors of the natural world. There are no membership fees, no ads, no gimmicks, just an opportunity to be part of this global initiative of nature photographers dedicated to caring for the natural world. You can learn more at naturefirstphotography.org.